Here we go. Oh man. Okay. Here goes nothing. I'm gonna try and stay in this guy's wake. He's parting the Red Sea for me. Okay. Howdy. So we are crossing the bridge into Matamoros from Brownsville. This is what this looks like. This little section of the Rio Grande is not super big. I'm gonna go through customs, so I gotta shut this off. Okay, made it through. Somewhat minimal questioning. Kind of explaining what I'm up to. Oh my. Okay, so we're on the back end of a whole lot of rain, and we've got a big old puddle. Okay. Oh, here we go. Oh, this isn't too bad. Okay. Oh, look at this. All of the workers, migrants lined up there. Interesting. Okay. It's actually more than I've seen anywhere else. So Matamoros has an interesting history. In the 1930s, it became a hub for the movement of alcohol, smuggling alcohol into the U.S. Of course, as a border town, these Mexican spots wound up being great little party spots for folks to head over from the U.S. But this area in particular was well known for being a spot where there was alcohol that could get crossed, also heroin, opium, and the precursor to the Gulf cartel started around this time. The real start of the cartel, though, where it really kind of got kicked off as a major Mexican cartel force, was in the mid-'80s, when what had kind of become the Gulf cartel at the time, and was for a short time a piece of the large first cartel, the Guadalajara cartel, wound up striking up a deal with the Cali cartel in Colombia to move cocaine through Matamoros and into Brownsville, and then on up into the further U.S. And it became a spot where up to a third of the Cali cartel's product was moving through this kind of Gulf cartel area. So we kind of have a string of cities along here: Matamoros, and then going north, Reynosa, and then there's some smaller towns and stuff in between, but eventually up to Nuevo Laredo. And so the Gulf cartel, on the back of all that money, wound up becoming very powerful. A big kind of driving force in moving drugs primarily up into the U.S. They have been involved in the past with some amount of exploitation of local businesses, charging them protection money, protection racketeering, etc. And then, of course, they're going to have their hand in pretty much everything from prostitution now to human trafficking, running migrants, really taxing the coyotes who are running the migrants. Now, this region here across the northern state of Tamaulipas is a spot where where you have basically, on the US side, you have a big string of towns and cities, and then on the Mexican side you have the same. So it's an enormous border to cover, and the Rio Grande is not particularly unnavigable down here. It's relatively small and fairly easy to cross with a small boat or flotation device or whatever. And so you're just getting lots and lots of migrant traffic, drug traffic, et cetera, coming through the area. So kind of the three key border regions where most of the action is at is going to be kind of this area, Tamaulipas, and there's a section where a little sliver of Tamaulipas goes up and over the Mexican state of Nuevo León, and it's called the Chica Frontera, and it's a particularly happening spot for the movement of illicit things and people. And so we have this area, then we have Juarez and El Paso is a corridor. To some lesser extent, there's Nogales, and then Tijuana on the west. So you kind of have a Tijuana, El Paso, and then Matamoros, Reynosa, this area. So we're going to drive around a little bit. The Gulf Cartel wound up getting very powerful in the 80s and 90s, and then a series of decapitation strikes against its leaders started to threaten its ability to hang on. And so there wound up being a move by the cartel to take on an army, basically a set of foot soldiers that they had recruited from deserters or people that had finished with the Mexican military, but mostly special forces oriented. And they formed the kind of private army of the Gulf Cartel starting in about 2004. By about 2009, that group, called the Zetas by that point, was working on freeing itself from being under the control of the Gulf Cartel. And so when the big Gulf Cartel boss, Cardenas Guyen, was arrested in 2010, the Zetas basically freed themselves from the Gulf Cartel control and actually started to then contest the Gulf Cartel for territory, along with a number of other cartels that they were fighting and allying with. And it was a period where there was a lot of conflict. This was in the kind of 2010, 2011, 2012 range, and then the Zetas exploded across Mexico. They were heavily recruiting out of migrant populations. They would kidnap groups of migrants and force them to work for them, either as gunmen or ferrying drugs, or they were doing all kinds of stuff. But they were also kidnapping people. They were using force to then manipulate other people to run drugs and kill people, and it was a mess. But they were particularly brutal. On some level, Mexico hadn't seen anything like that at such a large scale ever. The Zetas just really took it up a notch. And they've been tagged with killing up to 72 people in a go, where they captured a bunch of migrants on a bus and took them to a warehouse and basically just lined them up and said, "Are you going to join us?" And for some reason they all said no, so they shot them all. Just lined them up, blindfolded them, handcuffed them, and went down the line and shot them all. Now, one of the people survived, a young Ecuadorian guy who managed to get to the Mexican Marines, who then came to investigate and found the crime scene. But there have been a number of massacres in this area. Around that time period, I want to say it's 2011, there was another 193 people killed and discovered in a mass grave. But it sounds like the number of just mass killings may be some number of hundreds of people above that. And that's just the Zetas being bloodthirsty. There's stories about them capturing groups of migrants and forcing the young men to fight each other to the death in gladiatorial combat, raping the women. I mean, it's bad. It's bad. And so there was a big conflict where a number of the cartels all kind of ganged up on the Zetas and hammered them really hard, as did U.S. law enforcement, as did Mexican law enforcement, because things were just out of control. And so now we're in a spot in Tamaulipas where the former Zeta cartel, who had taken over most of the Gulf cartel assets, have been broken up. There's still some factions, a couple of factions that exist, the strongest of which is based in Nuevo Laredo. This is the CDN, or Cartel del Noreste, or the Northeast Cartel, in Northeast Mexico, and they have a base in Nuevo Laredo, and they basically, from all news accounts, control all aspects of the town. Their influence stretches down along the Chica frontera, and then further inland in Nuevo Leon and southwestern Tamaulipas, you have another splinter faction of the Zetas called the old school Zetas. And then there's several factions of the Gulf cartel, and most of these were kind of the various gang armies that sprang up as the Gulf cartel was splintering and fracturing, as its leaders kept getting killed or arrested, and repeated decapitations just led to a ton of infighting. So there's a number of different factions in this area now. They kind of control different towns. So right now in Tamaulipas, the best that I can uncover is that the Ciclones are the ones in control here, potentially backed up by the Scorpions, but their control doesn't extend too much farther out past town. There's lots of kind of shifting alliances, and there's not a lot of really good recent intel from places like Insight News, who does a lot of this kind of cartel reporting. So we're going to cruise around town and just kind of take a look at everything. We're on the back end of a whole lot of rain from yesterday, as that almost tropical storm wound up blowing through. So let's see what we can find. quick trip. Headed back over the Rio Grande now into the U.S. And nice short line today. Huzzah! Some of the reviews of this bridge are that it can take a few hours to get across. So I was able to get right up to the station where you pay the fee. And now I'm pretty dang near halfway across the bridge. This is great. So, just to give a view. Of a fertile valley, but not a whole lot of river. A lot of water moving through there. On all of these bridges, you get a lot of these vendors that you can see back here. She's out braving the weather, but normally you'd have just a whole string of people, especially because up here you've got the second lane is blocked off, and so under normal circumstances that would be like all vendors trying to sell you stuff. Annoyingly. So decided to take kind of the long way around to get back into Brownsville, and we've got a section of the wall here that must be built in a little ways from the Rio Grande, and I'm assuming that that's because the Rio Grande gets rather shallow and small. But I noticed there's a spot here where they've got the gate open, so I'm going to do a little bit of recon and see what this looks like. Just real fast. Oh, I see. There's residences out here on the other side of the fence. Okay. The fence kind of runs both directions. This will be Patrol Road up here. Yeah, they've got a farm up there. So, interesting. Must have just picked the best path to kind of eminent domain some of people's lands to get the wall up. It peters out after a bit, and it gets kind of into a wildlife preserve area. Just to give a view of what this looks like here. We got this chunk of wall that's built a little ways in from the border, and on some level, yeah, you can see here, 1419 Ranch LLC. Things are really soggy, so I want to try not to get stuck here. But yeah, so up here we got somebody with their ranch, and just consulting my Google Maps, I don't know how visible this is, but this ranch appears to kind of pooch out a little bit, maybe along possibly a more historic route for the Rio Grande. It's possible that either the river is smaller than it used to be when the border was negotiated, or it's changed course, and so there's a little bit of land here, but you've got this chunk of wall, and there's a number of properties that are built so that the wall just kind of makes the backstop to their backyard. We're at a spot here where Mexico is, maybe 50 feet past the fence. Texas and remain in your car, this curve, this is it. Well, extends a little ways further, but it kicks back inland from here. We can see here. So this here must be maybe even part of Mexico? No, that might be American. Got some puppies. Guess we'll have to take a look at the map, but I wonder if they've got an electric gate opener. Let's take a look here. Okay, so, oh yeah, this road is literally called Southmost Road. You can see it curves over, so essentially, man, it is not far at all. So I think that little settlement area might be like right down in here. Let's see if we can get satellite view. Yeah, here we go. Okay, yeah, so there's that farm. And I guess this is the Rio Grande. Okay. So I stand corrected. So the wall is essentially running all the way along here. The Rio Grande pooches out a ways, and so there's a little bit of farmland here. And it looks like the Rio Grande is the actual border. And then it heads south. And it pooches out and then starts heading west. But, sure enough, it's as far south as we go. I mean, technically, Hawaii is farther south than Texas. So, it's not the southernmost point of the U.S., but... Oh, and actually even Key West is further south, if I remember correctly, than this. But one of the extremities of these United States. So I was just having a really interesting conversation with a couple of folks as I was getting my oil changed. And they were telling me that the state of journalism right now in the Rio Grande Valley on the Mexican side is pretty grim. A lot of the journalists have been paid off by the cartel to not report on stuff that's happening within the cartel. And so, for example, last week there was a bus of some 50 people that was hijacked by the cartel going between Tamaulipas and Reynosa, and the people were all kidnapped. And there was nothing in the news about it. None of the American or Mexican journalists wrote about it. The reason that it's known about, and apparently pretty well known, is there are Facebook groups now that have filled in some of the news gathering landscape with, hey, here's what's really happening. So there were alerts that went out last week when this kidnapping happened to let everybody know, hey, here's what's going down. This could be an indication that we're returning to a time in this part of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, where large-scale kidnappings are going to become more commonplace. The Gulf Cartel and the Zetas were notorious 10, 18 years ago for kidnapping large numbers of people and then forcing them to run drugs or shoot up towns or kill specific people. And if they refused, they would just kill them. And so I hope that we're not in a situation where we're seeing more of that, but watching a busload of people get kidnapped and disappear in between these couple of cities is not a good sign. Was chatting with them a bit further on this, and there's a set of blogs that are likely, according to them, connected to the cartels, where they talk about their exploits. It's quite graphic. These are pictures and stories that are being told of what's happening on the ground in the battles between the different factions of the Gulf cartel and the Zetas. Anytime there's a large amount of factions, usually because there was some kind of law enforcement effort to decapitate, whether that's American or Mexican, you wind up with a lot of fractiousness and violence on the Mexico side. Occasionally it spills over to the US side. In the Rio Grande Valley, it's not unusual for there to be kidnappings on US soil where Americans will get grabbed, knocked out, drugged up, thrown in a trunk of a car, and taken back across the border for ransom or torture or whatever that person happened to be involved with, or whatever the cartel needed from them. Things are kind of scary here. It's got a different feel here than in other places in Mexico. And that may just be because the powers that be are a little bit more settled in a lot of these other places in the US and Mexico. You know, Sinaloa has their turf. CGNG has their turf. Juarez Cartel has their turf. And there may be some internal beefing because none of these cartels, well, I guess other than CGNG, which El Mencho is the kind of top-down, very powerful leader there, but none of the other cartels have a single power broker. There's usually several people or a couple of groups that are under that banner, and they may or may not be fighting or cooperating at any given time. But when you don't have that cooperation, and you have lots of individual players like you've got here in the Rio Grande Valley, it's just got a different feel. It just feels so much more dangerous, and people are scared on both sides of the border. They know talking about things cartel related will often bring heat down on them, and so they don't want to talk about it except in hushed tones and, you know, making sure that nobody's listening. It feels weird to be in the United States and have that be the reality. Although it also does feel kind of weird to go to a Walmart in the US and most of the people there don't speak English. Which I have no problems with. It's just funny. One interesting thing that I learned, one of the primary money laundering vectors here in this part of Texas is through what are called game rooms. So these are almost like little mini casinos where, due to Texas law, the slot machines and video poker and stuff cannot pay cash payouts, but they can pay out silver, and so they do. And so it's this loophole that the cartels that are putting these game rooms together, and these things are apparently just always full, especially of senior citizens. These game rooms are a massive amount of income for them. And so once somebody's playing and earns some money or earns some silver, then they can walk out of the game room and exchange their silver for US dollars. So, wow, that's the first I've heard of anything like that. Getting paid out in silver that you then convert to dollars because getting paid out in dollars is illegal. But apparently there's quite a few of these game rooms sprinkled throughout the Rio Grande Valley, and this is one of the ways that the cartel is able to make money, launder money, all of the above. So we're headed on the road out to as far southeast as you can drive in the US, Boca Chica Beach. But there is also another thing out here, and that is they got this little installation with caricature type drawing of Elon Musk, Occupy Mars, and then Ad Astra. So let's see if we can find that launch point and hopefully not get too wet. Okay, we got a couple of signs coming up. Guessing they're going to be dealing with, sure enough, SpaceX. Alright, test facility. SpaceX authorized personnel only. Starbase straight ahead. Oh. And we are rolling into some pretty dark clouds. If the water gets too deep, I'm going to have to turn around. Water levels are getting high. Starting to come over the road. Okay, I am going to have to get into this beach and get back out again. So otherwise I'm going to be driving through a river to do it. Oh man. Oof, okay. No, looks like I'm going to get blocked. Dang. Looks like they got a police officer. Oof. Okay, may not have to turn around. I think they just have it down to single lane traffic. So they're stopping people up going one direction. Yeah, sure enough. Okay, yeah, this is going to be get in, get out. I believe this is the launch facility straight ahead. I think I see a rocket. All right, here we go. Oh man. Okay, here goes nothing. I'm gonna try and stay in this guy's wake. He's parting the Red Sea for me. Okay, wasn't quite as bad as I thought it was gonna be, but it is still really raining, so it only gets worse from here. Yeah, this is going to be get in, get out. It's super warm and humid, so it's almost like bathtub water warm. Huh. Guess I never expected to see anything like this. Must be like the Falcon Heavy rocket, maybe. Looks like there's a few of them right there, actually, or maybe the rocket's open. Can't tell. Wow, this whole place just looks like a set of islands. There's so much water everywhere. Not a lot of Teslas in the parking lot. thing that takes humanity out to space. Look at that. And that must be just the big headquarters. Infrastructure in here. This is cool. Ooh, and then housing. Oh, a ton of modular housing. Okay. Go figure. My AC belt is so wet that it's slipping. Alright, we're apparently 2 miles from the beach, so let's get in and get this done. So this has got to be the launch site that we're rolling up on. And so they'll take the rockets, like those Falcon Heavies that are lined up there, and this is where they go from. Oh man, I had no idea you could get so close to all this infrastructure. Water levels are getting high, but not breaching the road yet. Looks like they're trying to get debris out of the road. Okay. Oh, I see. I see what's going on. So they're dumping rocks in here because the water had washed away their ability to get up and into the launch site. So they're mounding up some. Look at all that water. Okay. And then this is out here what this looks like. Looks like, oh man, I can see the waves up there are crazy high. Alright, what do we got? Oh wow, look at that. Isn't that crazy? Sensitive wildlife habitat. This area is not a SpaceX viewing area. Driving on sand dunes is prohibited. Okay, so this must be a spot around where people come down to check things out. Let's pop in here a little closer to the beach, because those are some waves. Look at that. Looks like we might have even had some high water that wash some of this debris back up here. I don't think the fishing is going to be very good right now. Wow. Yeah, check this out. Sea turtle nesting season, April to September. Wow. All of this new sand is down. Driving down the beach. Oh boy. Don't come in too close, oh no! Oh man. Yeah, so the tops of these waves are getting high enough that they're basically washing down the road. Wow. Stormy seas. Okay, so and a friendly security guard let me know that there's no flying drones within a couple of miles of the launch site, and then there's that other testing center back there, the Massey Testing Center, and that's got a couple of mile flight restriction around it as well. So won't be getting drone in the air. And he also said that the surf is going to get a lot higher, that it has been ramping up since yesterday, and he said he's expecting it to get pretty crazy. I guess a number of years ago there was a pretty big storm, and he said this should be getting about as bad, so this whole area is going to get inundated with water. He's looking at my car, he's like, dude, I don't know, I'd probably head back while I can make it. So I'm going to take his advice and get out of here. So we're out of the range of the Starbase. Got a couple of miles that you're not allowed to launch a drone around there. So I'm taking it up to about 300 feet. And we can see out over the Rio Grande here. And there. Just going to do a quick pan and then bring her back down. That's looking out over the Rio Grande into Mexico. This is panning east. That's where the big storm surge and everything are. And you can see the Starbase. Oh, it's telling me strong winds. So I'm going to do a real quick recon and then bring her back down. Okay, down we go. Bring her on down. It's also a little wet, so definitely want to not tempt fate. And get her landed safely.